Hello everyone, no one of consequence here, back again with a new video. This is episode 68 in a series which recounts my ongoing Dungeons & Dragons campaign, which is now in its 10th year. So as always, spoiler alert, in this video I will be revealing details found in this adventure module. And just as a reminder, here's the current makeup of the adventuring party. We have 8 characters being controlled by 5 different players. However, as we saw in the last video, 2 of those player characters have split off from the main group and have taken the party's wagon train of trade goods on up ahead. And of course, all of the NPCs associated with the party have gone with the wagon train as well. So here's a look at the Dro map the characters have, which we haven't looked at for a while. This arrow points out the approximate location of where this group of characters are, where they are now. It's just short of that large hex area, which represents the Kuo-Toa shrine. And again, where we left off last time, Gorbatok had just completed a reconnaissance of the Kuo-Toa shrine and had located their slave-holding area. He confirmed that there was a Dro elf locked up in a prison cell, so the characters were hopeful that this was the one that they had been asked to rescue. So the characters then quickly worked out a plan. They believed that their entire group should be able to slip down this side hall, as pointed out at the bottom of this screenshot, which leads to the prison area. And they figure they should be able to do that without being observed by the Kuo-Toa guards located at the far north end of the shrine. And the reason is because that huge central pyramid with the Sea Mother idol on top should block the guard's line of sight. That fact, plus a couple of strategically placed stones with silence cast upon them, should prevent anyone from being alerted to what was going on. By now, Gorbadok's diminution potion had worn off, and he was now back to his normal size. And although he was still invisible, Gorbadok led the group back to the hall with the stairs going down into the prison area. At this point, he asked Niobe to cast silence on a couple of stones so they could be left here and thus prevent sounds from the raid from reaching any nearby Kuo-Toans. Thorol cast a mirror image on himself just prior to the attack on the prison complex. Trostley said that he himself would join the characters while his lads stayed topside and guarded the stairwell. They would also be able to give an early warning if any Kuo-Toans approached. So with that, the characters charged down the stairs together to begin their surprise raid. Aramis, Obrak, and Trostley turned south to attack the Kuo-Toan guards there. Meanwhile, Thorol, Niobe, Gorbadok, and Garrett turned north. Since Thorol wears no armor, he was able to run further ahead than the others. The Kuo-Toan guard that Gorb had seen taunting the Dro prisoner earlier was still there. It seems that he had been posted there to make sure the Dro didn't somehow get free from his chains when no one was watching. At any rate, Thorol attacked the Kuo-Toan with a staff, while Garrett used his crossbow. Both characters succeeded with their attack rolls, and the Kuo-Toan went down. Back to the south, Obrak and Aramis had split up, and each of them charged one of the Kuo-Toan guards seated at the table. Obrak killed his opponent with a single blow. Aramis hit his target as well, but the Kuo-Toan did not go down. Meanwhile, Trossley began calling out to the deep gnome in the deep gnome language to his kin in the nearby prison cell. Niobe and Thorol began dragging the dead Kuo-Toan down the aisle while Gorb continued running north. Aramis, Obrak, and Trossley all focused their attacks on the final Kuo-Toan guard and quickly finished him off. They noticed he was carrying a ring of large bronze keys, which Obrak quickly grabbed up. It was at this point that a haggard yet noble-looking man stepped up to the prison cell door. He said his name was Berenger and that he was a paladin of Paylor. Of course, he asked the characters to unlock the cell door so they could all escape. Back to the north, Niobe and Thorol dragged the dead Kuo-Toan guard into the torture chamber area. Gorbadoc approached a door at the far north end of the aisle, but found that it was locked. Meanwhile, two ghasts, which were in nearby prison cells, began lunging and reaching through their cell bars, trying to grab for Gorb. Although he was invisible, the ghast could clearly sense and probably smell his presence. Meanwhile, back down at the south end, Obrak unlocked the cell door, and the humans and demi-human prisoners began filing out. Aramis told them to head upstairs, and Berenger the Paladin quickly took charge of the group. Back to the north, Thorol went to the prison cell holding the shackled Drow elf. Unfortunately, the Drow they had been asked to rescue was a female noble, but this Drow was a male. Thorol briefly spoke to him in the elf language, and he said his name was Zekru and that he was a merchant. Meanwhile, Gorbadoc headed back south towards Obrak to get the keyring from him. As the human prisoners filed up the stairs, the nearby bugbears started shaking the bars of their cell doors and shouting at the characters in the bugbear language. It was clear that they were demanding to be freed as well. Further south, the troglodytes were doing the same thing at their cell door. They were becoming so riotous that Obrak bashed on the cell door with his warhammer to drive them back. He was afraid that they might actually break down the door in their desperation to not be left behind. As each prisoner filed by, Niobe checked to make sure they had no injuries that were in need of immediate healing. Luckily, except for being overworked and underfed, they were all in relatively good health. Berenger stopped to ask Aramis how did the characters know they were all down here and needed rescuing. Aramis admitted that they didn't. They were actually only here on a mission to rescue a Drow noble. Obviously, this information surprised the paladin. Berenger had just assumed that the characters were here to rescue their fellow humans and demi-humans. Aramis promised to explain everything when there was more time, but for now, he needed Berenger's help in getting everyone out of here. While all this was going on, Gorbadoc asked for the ring of keys which Obrak had taken from the Kuo-Toan guard. Since he was still invisible, Gorb's voice suddenly appearing out of nowhere startled Obrak. Even though Gorb is invisible more often than he is not, the other characters never quite get used to him suddenly speaking to them out of thin air. At any rate, Gorbadoc assured Obrak that he had a cunning plan to carry out once all the human and demi-human prisoners were safely away. So Obrak handed the keys over to Gorbadoc. The deep gnome prisoners followed the last of the humans and dwarves out of the cell. Trostley had already explained to them in the deep gnome language what was going on, so they were trying to help coordinate the rescue. As the last of the freed prisoners filed up the stairs, the monsters became more uproarious, demanding to be released as well. Luckily, the stones with silence cast upon them had been dropped at the far end of the upper hallway, which prevented all this noise from reaching the general shrine area. The characters followed the last of the prisoners and returned upstairs. Everyone, that is, except for the still invisible Gorbadoc. He stayed behind so he could now carry out his cunning plan. As a parting action, Thorol cast a haste spell on everyone located nearby, including Gorbadoc. Upstairs, the newly freed prisoners were milling about in the hallway, while Trostley's lads were trying to maintain some sense of order. Again, the silence stones, and you can see the area of effect on the far left-hand side, prevented the noise from all this from carrying out into the main shrine area. Once the characters and Berenger arrived on the scene, they took charge of the crowd. After quieting everyone down, Aramis and Berenger led the group back out into the main intersection. Meanwhile, the other characters acted as a rear guard to make sure that no one was left behind. Aramis led everyone to the vicinity of the Deep Gnome's secret spy tunnel entrance, which is pointed out here. Once they got there, he halted the column. Back in the prisoner area, Gorbadoc used the key ring to unlock the door at the far north end of the hallway. He had hoped that the Drow noble they were looking for might be found inside. Unfortunately, the room contained only food supplies for the Kuo-Toan slaves. Next, Gorb unlocked the door to the Drow merchant's prison cell, but he did not unlock the chains and shackles restraining the elf. After that, Gorbadoc unlocked the cell door holding one of the trolls. Seeing the door suddenly swing open, the creature sprang out of its cell and into the hallway. However, since Gorb was still invisible, it could not see him. As the first troll ran towards the stairs, Gorb unlocked the cell holding the second troll. Once both trolls were away, Gorbadoc unlocked the two cells holding the bugbear prisoners. Again, since Gorb was still invisible, the bugbears could not see him, so they simply took advantage of the situation and fled upstairs. Next, Gorb unlocked the holding cell containing all the troglodytes, hobgoblins, gnolls, and orcs. He stood aside as those creatures poured through the doorway and raced up the stairs. Once those monsters were away, Gorbadoc returned to the Drow's cell and unlocked his chains. He could not see Gorb, but he obviously knew that someone was there. He said a couple of things in the Drow language, which Gorb could not understand, and then exited the prison cell. Next, the Drow ran for the stairs while Gorbadoc watched him go. Lastly, Gorb was planning to unlock the cells holding the ghasts. However, at about this time, Thorol's haste spell expired. Therefore, Gorb abandoned his original plan, since he knew that the ghasts could still smell him even if they couldn't see him. And, with the haste spell gone, he worried that he might not be able to outrun them either. Back upstairs, the other monster prisoners released by Gorbadoc began running down the hall away from the prison area. Gorb decided that he would still try to release the ghasts, first by positioning himself near the stairs, and then tossing the keys down the hall towards their prison cells. He hoped to land the keys close enough to one of the cells that the ghast inside could reach through the bars and unlock the door himself. And, since ghasts are an intelligent form of undead, Gorb hoped that the one would stay long enough to free the other ghast, all of which would take a little time. And by then, Gorb planned to be far, far away. Gorbadoc actually fumbled his dice roll to throw the keys accurately, and the key ring bounced off a wall and began sliding across the stone floor. However, a lucky series of follow-on direction and distance rolls resulted in the key ring still coming to rest directly in front of a ghast's prison cell door. Satisfied with that, Gorb bolted up the stairs, running as fast as he could. Back in the tunnel, Aramis quickly explained to Berenger why the characters were here in the first place. He then told Berenger that the Deep Gnomes had agreed to lead them all back to the Gnomes' home city to rest and recover before being taken to wherever they wished to go. Meanwhile, the newly freed Drow caught up to the humanoids running up the stairs, so he lingered back in the darkness. He knew that none of them had any love for the Drow in general, and he didn't want to risk being seen by them. Thorol quickly told the newly freed prisoners about the plan to get them safely away from this place. Back at the shrine, Gorbadoc saw the Drow elf lingering on the stairs, waiting for the freed humanoid monsters to move away. That was understandable, but there was one small problem. Behind them both, the shrieks of the ghasts could be heard echoing up from the prison area. They would undoubtedly soon be heading up the stairs themselves. The humanoids could now hear the ghasts too, and so they hurried along. This allowed the Drow and Gorbadoc to advance as well. Gorbadoc's cunning plan was to release these monsters in the hopes that they would all go running amok throughout the Kuo-Toan shrine. This should cause enough chaos and distraction that the characters and the prisoners would be far away before the Kuo-Toans could mount any pursuit. The problem with the plan was that all of the monster slaves were very familiar with the Kuo-Toan shrine layout, having been on work details throughout the place. This also meant that the prisoners were well aware of all the exits which would allow them to escape from the shrine. And so the trolls, who were leading the pack of newly freed humanoid slaves, reached the shrine entrance and immediately began running south, which was, of course, the nearest exit. Back at the main group of characters, Thorol could see and hear in the distance what was happening. So he cast a wall of ice spell blocking the tunnel. He hoped that this would delay the trolls and other monsters long enough to get everyone out of sight. The trolls continued to run down the passage south and soon encountered Thorol's wall of ice. They immediately began clawing at the barrier, desperate to break through it. Niobe saw the shadows of the trolls through the wall of ice. She warned the others that the monsters would soon break through it and be heading this way. Trossley led everyone into the Deep Gnome secret spy tunnel so they could all hide from the approaching monsters. It was a cramped space for everyone to fit into, but they shouldn't have to wait there for very long. Back at the shrine area, the still invisible Gorbadoc stood aside while the rest of the monsters passed by and turned south. Luckily, it seemed that Gorb's cunning plan wasn't a total loss after all. In their rage and desire for revenge, the gas had apparently taken a different path from everyone else once they exited the prison area. Gorbatok speculated that they might have even charged in the direction of the Kuo-Toan breeding pool, which he had discovered earlier. If that were the case, then they could soon expect the entire Kuo-Toan shrine to be in a complete uproar after all. Back to the south, once the wall of ice was destroyed, the monsters continued fleeing down the passageway. Gorbatok crept along nearby so he could eventually rejoin the other characters. Unaware of the Deep Gnome's nearby hideout, the monsters simply kept running south and off into the Underdark. Most were probably from the humanoid tribes living in the Great Cavern, which the characters had previously passed through. If so, the now freed monsters undoubtedly hoped to return to that location. Behind the mob of monsters, Gorbatok continued to shadow the Drow elf as he cautiously moved south as well. Once they were near the Deep Gnome hideout, Gorbatok finally called to the Drow to get his attention. The other characters also came out of hiding, and Thorol spoke to the Drow, saying that they were the ones who freed him and the other prisoners. The Drow elf explained that he was from a merchant clan aligned with the Drow House Kilsec, which is itself part of the Pro-Loth faction, and that he was captured while leading a trading caravan. The characters told him that they had another Drow merchant traveling with them, Rabnuno, and were planning to sell trade goods to his clan. Zekru claimed that Rabnuno's merchant clan was a standalone independent and that they did not actually have access to that much wealth. On the other hand, Zekru said that his merchant clan had the full weight and wealth of House Kilsec behind it. Zekru said that if the characters would escort him back to the Drow City, his clan would pay them a better price for their trade goods than Rabnuno's clan could afford. So the characters agreed to take him along. They also asked if he knew of a female Drow noble being held by the Kuo-Toans, but he said he knew nothing about it. So the original plan called for waiting in the Deep Gnome hideout for a couple of days for things to cool down, and then returning directly to the Kuo-Toan shrine. The characters would go through the tithing ritual just as Varys had done, pass through the shrine, and then catch up with the wagon train. However, the characters now decided to instead go back south and then take an alternate route which would lead them back to the Kuo-Toan shrine from the northeast. So, going back to the map, as I pointed out earlier, the characters are currently located here. Their new plan was to travel south a few miles, back to this Y intersection. They would then take the easternmost route, heading back to the northwest. This route takes a sudden turn and approaches the Kuo-Toan shrine from the northeast. The characters hoped that this plan would completely shield them from any suspicion that they were responsible for the prison breakout. So, as the characters prepared to move out, they bid Trossley farewell and thanked him for all his help. He, in turn, thanked the characters for freeing their fellow Deep Gnomes from the Kuo-Toans, and wished them well in their quest. Alright, well that's all I have for now. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button. If you can, leave a comment. Let me know what you think. If you haven't yet, please subscribe to the channel. If you know of a good place, please share the video. And anything you can do to help support the channel, I appreciate it. Thanks again. Bye for now.
greatest adventure is what